I wonder why nobody don't like me. Or is it a fact that I'm ugly? I wonder why nobody don't like me. Or is it a fact that I'm ugly?
Hello, and welcome back to the second part of this week's episodes. Hopefully you've already listened to the first part with our lovely, lovely guest, Nikki Jizz. If not, go ahead and scroll back, give it a listen. She is a huge bucket of fun. Plus, we have her partner in crime on the pod this week, Florida Man. But before we get into any of that, of course, some housekeeping notes up at the top. Please do not forget that you can send any sort of comments, questions, or calls for advice to my email. That's wtf@deon.wtf. That's DEON.wtf. And you can also head over to that website, hit me up through the contact page. It's super fun. Give us something a little bit new and refreshing to talk about on the podcast. And as I mentioned in the last episode, I am still searching for some collaborators on a theme for this podcast, so musicians, come and hit me up. But besides that, not a lot of notes. Let's get into it. I am so excited to share this really lovely conversation that I had with Florida Man. It gets pretty earnest and pretty real. So as you can see from the name of this episode, the main topic that we get into is drugs and drug use. So I want to give a disclaimer to all of our listeners that we get into some pretty detailed, and granted fascinating, but detailed accounts of drug use, drug addiction, drug abuse, and it's a very no-holds-barred kind of conversation around those topics. So if you feel that you would be triggered by any of those things, or have any sort of adverse reaction, please do not hesitate to just, not listen to this episode, fast forward through the tough parts, no judgment whatsoever. And that said, I just want to say as a disclaimer that both Florida and I have a huge amount of experience with addiction, be it with ourselves or other people in our lives, and we do not take it lightly. We do not take drug use lightly, and we only condone the utmost safety when it comes to drug use and your sobriety and your health and your wellness. So I wanted to go ahead and just say right here that if you are a listener and you are struggling with drug abuse or drug addiction at this moment, there is a huge network of people and professionals here to provide support for you, and there is always an end to this sort of suffering and these sort of struggles. So I wanted to take this moment to promote the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration helpline. I looked into a few different places for resources, and there is obviously a lot of controversy when it comes to drug treatment, but I do believe that this helpline is a really, really great place to start if you are struggling right here and now. So go ahead and call their toll-free helpline, 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. It is a free, confidential, 24/7, 365-day-a-year treatment, referral, and information service provided both in English and Spanish. And you can call it if you are somebody currently struggling with drug abuse or addiction, or you know somebody who is and you do not know what to do. They are here for you. We are here for you. But in the meantime, I have this very, very lovely episode in conversation with Florida Man. And hello, we're recording.
Oh my gosh.
Say hello to Florida Man. Florida Man, say
hello to Florida
everyone.
Man. Hi.
How is it going? We are recording on New Year's Eve. How has your New Year's Eve been so far?
This has been a very contemplative day. I take my New Year's very seriously, so
Me too. That's a great topic to start on, actually. Like, are you somebody that subscribes to the spirituality and the reflection of New Year's Eve?
Yeah, this year more than ever. I've always taken my New Year's resolutions very seriously. They've always been things where, like, I don't know, 8 times out of 10, I followed through with them.
Right.
And there's something about the ritual, I think, of not just New Year's, but like the whole month of December for me. Like, I love the holiday spirit. And even though I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily identify with Christianity, I do love that sort of ritual.
Yes.
So
the winding
today
down
I woke up
at the end of the year.
Yeah. This year more than ever, I woke up, I lit some incense, I meditated, I drew some cards, and
Lovely.
got ready for. I wrote down some of. I'm not doing New Year's resolutions anymore. I'm doing New
Okay.
Year's intentions.
Lovely. Okay, so I've actually already heard that word like 20 times today, which is hilarious to me.
It's the word of the year.
Yeah, I've been checking in with a bunch of my like queer friends about their New Year's Eve plans, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're just setting intentions at home. Oh, we're having a little intention session." So it seems like that's gonna really replace resolutions, because I feel like
I think so
resolutions
too.
come with a bunch of it. To resolve to do something is so much larger, I feel.
Yeah, they place a lot of expectations on the outcomes, and whereas intentions are more of a direction.
Yes, absolutely. And I can plug my little newsletter here. I wrote a little essay in my first newsletter. Go to imdeon.substack.com about New Year's, and like I was just reflecting on like it's always been important to me, and I can never really figure out why, but I like dug into it in my morning pages one day, and I was like, essentially, if like all of society falls away and Christianity becomes obsolete and family structures continue to morph and change and everything, we're still going to mark the year. Like we're never going to stop being able to keep time like as human beings. So I always felt like New Year's Eve is like if you strip everything else away, like we're always going to celebrate the passing of a year, or like a birthday is another thing that marks every year. And so like that's why the traditions behind it always make much more sense to me. And it's so like personal. You don't have to involve family in your like resolution journey and setting goals for the new year. It's a very much like I'm gonna think about me kind of holiday.
Yeah, and I've actually never thought of New Year's as being much of a family holiday for myself. Not at least not in the same way of something like Christmas or Thanksgiving or
Right.
some of these more family minded, or like I grew up with Easter being a big family holiday.
Yes.
But New Year's has always been more, yeah, I agree, more of a personal thing, more of like friends and chosen family. Like
Yes, absolutely.
that's how I've always thought of New Year's.
And good spirited like party too, because it's like
Yeah.
Halloween's like dirty, sexy, grungy party, and
Right.
then you have Fourth of July's patriotism and all this stuff, and New Year's Eve is very much like just celebration for the sake of it, champagne and glitter and
Yeah, like
sparkles and stuff.
like we fucking are still breathing. We hung in there one more fucking year. Like that's worth
Exactly.
celebrating.
Exactly. It seems so much more like essential to being alive.
Hmm.
Do you have any resolutions you can share? Anything that's on the horizon?
You mean
Or
intentions?
intentions, yes. And what do you intend to do with 2020?
That's actually
2021. Oh my god.
that's a the right. That's an interesting one. I mean, we can talk more about this later, but I've gotten a lot more. I mean, as I've been pretty public about my own like journey with addiction and recovery, and this past year I left the 12-step fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, Crystal Meth Anonymous, to sort of pursue my own explorations with like psychedelics in particular,
Very cool.
and have like dug down this crazy deep rabbit hole, which is a whole nother story. But I'm starting psychedelic therapy actually in like 2 days, like properly with like clinical setting and everything.
Very
And
exciting. I do want to dig into that a little bit later in the pod, because I am also going on a little bit of a psychedelic experience personally.
ooh, I love that.
Yes, but anything you checked in with this morning, the intentions?
Yeah, I mean, if previous year's resolutions have been more focused on ambition and like outward change, this year's intentions are more focused on like that internal change, partially because like we have the time and space to do it, partially because our entire worlds have been shaken upside down, and partially because I don't know, I've shown myself that I can meet the ambitious goals no problem. Those aren't the
Right.
ones I struggle with. It's the internal ones. So this one's going to be a very internal facing year, more so than 2020.
Absolutely. I dig that. Yeah, like especially with 2020 and then into 2021 has given
Yeah.
us the opportunity to like to do all of that internal work without the outside influence at all. Like we have the option to
Right.
block things out. We can truly just like remove ourselves from social media for weeks at a time, and people get it because of what the last year has been.
Drag me. I deleted my Twitter this morning.
Oh my god, that's really huge. Congratulations to you. You're
Thank you.
so brave. That's like one of the That's one of the things that when I will, of course, eventually detox myself from social media, that's going to be one of the harder
It
ones. Because I
is.
feel like Twitter is more than anything, and this is sad to say, but Twitter is more than anything like a community, more than Facebook and Instagram to me.
Yeah, a part of me is toying with the idea of creating a new Twitter account and not branding it as Florida Man, not really letting people know that it's me, because I feel like this weird, because people know Florida Man, the Lady Voldemort thing, this and that is where I'm sort of stuck in this sort of like,
Well, you have
I
to
don't know.
you have to put a level of your branding into it because it's Florida Man's Twitter account.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Whereas like Walter, I want to just sort of like, I enjoy Twitter as like a news source. I enjoy Twitter for all these other
exactly.
things. And it's not to say like that they can't coexist, but I'm trying to build healthy relationships with social media, and it's hard to do that when you've got this sort of like looming heaviness of Florida Man there.
Tell me about it. Like that's what like this podcast is a huge part of my like anti-social media journey because I'm
Sure.
slowly trying to like move myself to like methods of performance and like and putting art into the world that requires less of that like me scrolling interaction, less of my
Mm-hmm.
face and a screen kind of interaction, and things
Yeah.
that are more productive and perhaps like more impersonal, and so when it comes to things like Twitter and Instagram, it got exponentially harder when I was like, okay, is this Shixa's Instagram where things need to be promoted and
Sure.
sold, or is this Dion's Twitter where like I can put down the takes that are not fit for Instagram and everything? It's making those decisions like engrosses me in the social media process to a level that I am not interested in anymore. Like
Hmm.
I cannot be dedicating that amount of like mental energy to parsing out my identity on Twitter of all places.
Yeah, exactly. And let's be real, like it's a great way to like distribute ideas, but it's not a great place for discourse.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh it, I rarely have I seen a thoughtful conversation happen on Twitter, and I don't know.
Very
I just think
rarely. Very rarely. I cannot think of a single one in recent memory. Like the
yeah.
only productive thing that I think has come of Twitter this past year was like, oh God, like I guess organization around like the Black Lives Matter stuff. Like I'm thinking
Sure.
Chicago Black Drag Council kind of a lot of the support and the organization came from Twitter, but like that's
Yeah.
truly it. And then they became separate entities and thrived outside of the social media sphere. So it's like, yeah, I think we all need to do that, find our way out.
Right, exactly. It's like oh God, it always irritates me, people on the dating apps that are like give me a reason to not be on this app or something like that. But
Right.
but but I mean there is some truth to that too, right? Like the faster that you move away from that app and into the real life space, like the app was still useful, it served its purpose, but it doesn't necessarily need to be there for the entire stage of everything. So Twitter's great for like
Yes.
sparking the conversations, but maybe isn't the best place for having the conversations.
And that's the part of like social media that makes me turn to myself and be like, oh, like this is ridiculous. Social media is unhealthy and everything. Is how comfortable people are living in the online space. Like,
Yes.
and obviously that is a huge symptom of like of quarantine and COVID and all of these lockdowns and
Sure.
everything. But it's like I come across more and more often like interactions and people that like are clearly like you've spent probably the last 72 hours only interacting through Twitter and
Uh-huh.
Instagram and stuff, and it becomes a little bit too real for me. I'm like I need to fully check out and like stare at a wall because that is a more significant physical personal interaction than than the scrolling and the reading that I have been doing for hours on
And
end.
you know what? With the drugs I've been taking lately, the wall has had some very fascinating conversations.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get into that conversation. Let's pivot really quickly and do our
Sure.
first segment. So for every episode of Black and White, I like to give the listeners and myself an introduction to our guest by forcing you to condense your life story into 1 minute. So I'm going to put up a timer and feel free to highlight upbringing, selected traumas, family stuff, important events that have led up to where Walter and Florida are today. Do you feel prepared or at least ready to say something?
We'll see.
Okay. It always turns out better than people think it's going to, so we'll have fun with it. Ready, set, life story in 1 minute, go!
I am Florida, born Walter. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I was a Catholic schoolboy, little altar boy. Um, didn't necessarily have issues with the faith, but like clearly was not for me.